Richard.
And I'm Gary, and these are our incredible stories. Hello and welcome back to all of our listeners from around the world and across the United States. We're happy to have you here with us again for more incredible stories. And I have to say, we do have an incredible, some incredible facts to share. I don't know if it's a story, but they are incredible facts. Before we get started, if anybody is listening for the first time, welcome to our show. We're happy to have you here with us. And we hope that you enjoy what you hear. If you do, well, guess what? You can hit that subscribe button and you can join us every single Friday for new episodes. And occasionally we'll throw in an extra one, and it may not be on Friday. Maybe we'll just throw one in somewhere. But if you want to hear some incredible stories, you definitely found the place to listen to them.
Absolutely, Gary. And, I welcome each and every one of you folks who are listening to us at this moment from, guess what? More than 30 countries around the world. Isn't that spectacular, Gary?
I think that's pretty incredible. I mean, one of the cool things is that when we put these little stories out there, when we're sharing these little facts, I don't think neither one of us expected to have a reach that would go around the world in so many different countries.
Yeah.
So
thank you. Thank you so much for being with us, and we hope that you'll find this evening's entertainment to your liking. We're going to be talking about something that's part of human nature, and that is the love of playing games.
Absolutely.
For thousands of years, Gary, people have enjoyed playing games.
Mm-hmm. Even in the digital era, when we have Xbox and Nintendo Switch and PlayStation, for some reason, a large majority of people still love to play board games.
Yes, that's right. And I have to tell you that, unfortunately, the people thousands of years ago didn't have Nintendo and, digital games. It's amazing what they did have or didn't have. Some games even were played with stones, which we're going to find out about. But if you want to know some of the oldest known games in mankind, what would you guess they would be that are still with us today?
Well, I think chess and checkers would definitely be two that pop into my head.
Mm-hmm. And then there's one called backgammon, which I personally have never played. Do you know anything about backgammon?
I have played backgammon, although when I played it, it was a long time ago. And I remember one of the counselors at the summer camp that Mom worked at when I was much younger, he showed me how to play backgammon, and it was fun. It's a thinker of a game. It's definitely deals with strategy when you're playing with it. But if you buy the little sets at the store, the cheap checkers and chess sets,
they also have backgammon.
It has backgammon on the backside, and backgammon uses the pieces from checkers and some dice. Now, you can buy a nice backgammon set by itself, but if you're ever curious in playing it and you have one of the fold-out chess boards and you were wondering what that extra game is on the back, that's backgammon. So if you feel a little adventurous, give it a shot. It's worth it.
Next time you play checkers or next time you play a game of chess or even backgammon, which is probably not as popular as the other two, just remember you're playing something that people have used for entertainment, not just for 1,000 years, but for thousands of years.
Thousands of years.
Yes. Now, King Tut, everybody I think has heard about King Tut. He was buried with multiple sets of an Egyptian game called Senet, S-E-N-E-T.
Oh.
So when King Tut was alive, apparently he loved his board games to the extent that his survivors decided to bury him with them.
Well, if it was anything like Monopoly, they probably didn't get finished with the game, and they just had to keep it with them until they could get finished in the afterlife.
Yeah, right. Now, Ajax and Achilles, ancient heroes, They appear hunched over a board in the midst of play on hundreds of pieces of Greek pottery. Oh. So you see them actually playing games on this ancient Greek pottery.
Yeah.
The Ashanti people of Ghana in Africa, they created a board game called Wari, W-A-R-I, and we know it today as Mancala, and you're familiar with that.
Yeah, when you were telling me about it, I didn't know the name, so I decided to look it up. And sure enough, I have actually played Mancala, but I didn't know the name of it. But you can find it pretty much any store you go to.
You saw it in Target.
It was in Target, yeah. So, but it's when I was looking over the rules for it, you have 6 rows on one side, 6 rows on another side, and the object of the game is to collect seeds. They call the stones seeds, and you want to collect as many seeds as you can for your store. And by the end of the game, whoever has the most seeds wins the game. So
see how simple that is, and
it's very simple.
Why it would go back so many hundreds and thousands of years. Right. Mancala, M-A-N-C-A-L-A.
Yeah, but it's challenging. You know, that's the thing. Some of these older games, they were all about strategy, and so you really had to think out your moves specifically to have an objective.
And you can see that stones became some of the earliest playing pieces for these games.
Of course. Well, I mean, talk about simple. So.
Yeah. Now, let's fast forward from thousands of years ago up to the 19th century, which is the 1800s. This is when the board games started to be sold commercially, Gary. And the very first commercial board game was called The Mansion of Happiness.
Oh, The Mansion of Happiness. That sounds like fun.
And our friends in England, their ancestors are the ones who created The Mansion of Happiness. It came out in England in the year 1800 when Thomas Jefferson was elected president of the United States.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Now, the mansion was heaven, and the players raced to get there. So everybody was rushing to get to heaven.
Everybody wants to get to heaven.
Yeah, in the Mansion of Happiness. Now, fast forward to the 1900s, and there's a guy named Milton Bradley. We've heard of him.
Yes.
Milton Bradley is a huge powerhouse name in board games.
That he is.
Well, there was actually a person named Milton Bradley, and he worked and rebranded the Mansion of Happiness and called it the Checkered Game of Life. That title got shortened, and it is now the Game of Life.
Oh.
You've played that.
I have played the Game of Life, and sometimes it works out very well for me, and sometimes it's not so
Yeah,
great.
you drive around in a car, you collect the wife, you collect kids, and this and the other.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't think there's any going to heaven in there, is there? Or is that still part of the...
I think you make it to the retirement home.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that's heaven, but you make it somewhere.
Okay, so the Mansion of Happiness has been changed a little bit in the modern version of the game.
It's been a while since I played it, but I remember the last time I played it, I ended up with 8 kids and I lived in a shack, so it didn't work out too well.
Parcheesi. Everybody's heard of Parcheesi. I'm not sure everybody's
yeah.
played it. I don't think I've ever played Parcheesi. That has its roots in ancient India. It was called Pachisi, and that was from the Hindi word for 25, and that's the highest possible outcome of a single throw of the dice, I guess. Now, Americans had to come along and tweak the name, and the Brits decided to call it Ludo. This is Latin for I play. So when Englishman Anthony E. Pratt developed his murder mystery board game in 1943, he called it Cluedo, which sounds like Ludo.
Right. But that would be the name of one of my favorite games, Clue.
Yes. The Americans came along, like I say, tweaked it, and now it is called Clue.
Yeah, which was so popular that it got its own movie in the 80s.
Ooh, yeah, right. And so this game came out in the middle of World War II in 1943, Cluedo, which now is Clue. Now, the international versions of Clue are a little bit different. The colorful cast can look quite different from what we're used to. In the United States version, Professor Plum, you remember him?
I do.
He was called Dr. Orange in Spain. And Mr. Green goes by Chef Lettuce in Chile.
How about that?
Mrs. Peacock is Mrs. Purple in Brazil. And Mrs. Periwinkle in France. And in Switzerland, she's actually a man, Captain Blue.
How about that? That's interesting to me. And
yeah.
I'd be curious to know why such a deviation from
game
to game.
Clue, which really is closely related to an Origin game called Cluedo from 1943, has undergone all of these different tweaks and reworkings and what have you. And I'm not sure why, somebody would turn into Chef Lettuce in Chile.
It's a fun game, It's one that you have to think, you have to be aware of what other people are doing, and you have to use a little bit of I think a little bit of manipulation to get some of the answers you're looking for to find out who the murderer is at the end.
Yeah, I like Clue.
I like that. It's a fun game.
We've all played Clue as a family, and so I've played Clue for decades.
Yeah. We have the special edition ones. I have Alien versus Predator Clue.
Yeah.
And Danielle has the Bob's Burger Clue game from
Bob's Burger.
From the TV show on Fox.
Yeah. Now, occasionally these games will inspire screenwriters, Gary, and you've already mentioned that 1985 movie Clue. But also, in 2000, there was a fantasy film, Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, yeah.
And in 2012, there was an action movie, Battleship, and these are all based on board games.
Yeah.
These movies.
It's funny. Dungeons and Dragons started out as a role-playing game. I want to say it was probably the late 70s, early 80s. That was very popular. It's a storytelling game. Alex, you remember Alex? He was on our show, my brother-in-law. And you have somebody who is the storyteller. They call him the Dungeon Master. He plays it a lot. And you develop a story through the whole time that you're playing it. And so it really does lend itself a lot more to making a movie about it. But I think it's had 2 movies made about it, and then the Netflix show Stranger Things. The game is the centerpiece of the first season of Stranger Things, and it kind of revolves around how they deal with the monster that is causing problems for them.
Now, Hasbro sells a game that it markets as a family game, and it's called the Ouija board.
Oh, the Ouija board.
And so the Ouija board inspired the 2014 horror flick Ouija.
Yeah. But that, you know what, the Ouija board is something that goes back even further as well, because before it was called the Ouija board, a lot of people called it the talking board. And it has its origin. You know what? While you're going through the rest of that, I'm going to look it up because I think it'd be interesting to see when the first version of Ouija came out. But I think it came out.
How do you play Ouija?
Well,
how do you use the Ouija board?
So if we're going into the taboos of Ouija boards, it's one of those things that in the paranormal society, you don't want to communicate with spirits. But if you are a 15 or 14-year-old girl at a sleepover, it's how you find out if the guy you like actually likes you.
Or 14, 15-year-old in Salem, Massachusetts in the 1690s.
Yeah, exactly. I believe they had a situation with that too. But basically what it is you have a centerpiece called the planchette that has a little glass piece cut out in the center that you look through. And everybody puts their hands on the planchette. And you have the alphabet A through Z. And then you have yes and no in the upper corners. And I believe there's one that says end or whatever. But basically, everybody puts their hands on the planchette. And you start moving it around. And I think there's a way you ask if somebody's there or whatever. But then you ask questions. And so the planchette will either move to yes or no. And then if it's something specific, the eyepiece will move over certain letters spelling out the answer that you're looking for. And of course, as far as I'm concerned, the majority of people who play it, one of the members of the group will do something so that it feels like it's moving on its own.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, I'm not moving it. That's not me. And then they'll make it say something stupid or ridiculous just to get a rise out of people. And then, of course, for the whole rest of the night, nobody can sleep.
But with
because they're scared out of their minds.
Right, because with the vivid imaginations going wild about the supernatural, the Ouija board has been known to really freak some people out.
Oh, of course it has. Of course it has. And you know what? Actually, this is a side thing, but we had talked when we were talking with Joe and Alex during Halloween. We had talked about how Joe remembered being a kid, and Danielle had a paranormal encounter as a child. And so I think it was Danielle's aunt or one of her mom's friends brought over a Ouija board to see if they could contact the spirit that Danielle was seeing. And it gave the name of a person. And when they looked it up, there was somebody who had lived in that apartment years ago by the same name.
So you see, it can. Now, for our international listeners, if you're interested in finding out more about the Ouija board, it's spelled a little bit differently from the way it's pronounced.
Yeah, it's with an O, isn't it?
Yes, Ouija. Ouija, Ouija. Ouija, the Ouija board. So anyhow, at least one board game they thought about developing into a television show. And its creator was a famous filmmaker, Albert Lamouris. Do you know what he wrote and directed in 1956, Gary?
No. What did he write and direct?
The Red Balloon.
Oh. I have seen that numerous times. In fact, I watched it recently.
And he created a board game. I hope I can pronounce this French correctly. La Conquête du Monde. Conquest of the World. Now, if you've never heard of it, that's because it never got to the United States as Conquest of the World. Parker Brothers packaged it up as a game which we call Risk. Risk.
Oh, I've played Risk before. I like Risk.
Me too.
Risk is a fun game.
And then there was another game inventor named Alfred Butts. His creation was called Lexico. Then it was named Crisscross Words. And finally, it got its name that we know today, Scrabble.
Ooh.
And Scrabble, by the way, is found in 3 out of every 5 American homes.
Yeah, you know what? I think that's probably one of the most popular games amongst, I would say, college students and people who are fans of crossword puzzles. It's one that I've never really been able to get into, but they've done so many different variations of it. In fact, there's one that Danielle loves called Go Bananas, and I have no idea what it has to do with bananas, but it's pretty much Scrabble without the board, and you have this banana that zips up, and inside of it has all the letter tiles, and you have to do these different letter combinations to create words and stuff, very much in the same vein as Scrabble. And points are based off of how many words you can make.
Now, I don't know as a lot of people have heard of Go Bananas, but Scrabble has inspired a couple of folks to create a game which we are very familiar with. Chris Haney and Scott Abbott, after playing Scrabble for some time, they decided they could come up with something interesting that was closely related, and their game is called Trivial Pursuit.
Oh, Trivial Pursuit. Who doesn't like Trivial Pursuit?
And that basically is, how do you play that, Gary?
It's been a while since I played it.
Oh, well, they have these cards.
Yeah, you have to answer different trivia on
connected
different
with trivial facts.
Yeah, and it's like history.
They have different
pop
categories.
Culture, stuff like that. Yeah, it's different things. We have. Oh, what did we? You know what? I played Trivial Pursuit the other day. Danielle got a again, she loves Bob's Burger. She got Bob's Burger Trivial Pursuit.
Oh, there you go. So now you know that the folks who created it were Chris Haney and Scott Abbott, and they got their inspiration from Scrabble.
Yeah, I actually like Trivial Pursuit more than I like Scrabble.
And the year before you were born, it sold, Trivial Pursuit sold up to $800 million worth of games, and it was even outselling Monopoly at one point.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know what? I could see that because people love trivia, and some people are better at trivia than others. You know.
And now that we've mentioned Monopoly, which to me is the 800-pound gorilla in the room, Monopoly is a long-time favorite and certainly brings up a lot of nostalgic memories, right, Gary?
Yes, it does.
Well, the man who sold Monopoly to Parker Brothers, who brought it into the American mainstream, he sold it in the 1930s. His name was Charles Darrow. And he's credited with creating the game, but it was actually a woman named Elizabeth Magee who decades earlier earned a patent for her invention called the Landlord's Game. And in the Landlord's Game, you would purchase railroads, you'd paid rent, you occasionally ended up in jail. And ironically, Magee's aim with the game was to show the evils of accumulating wealth by bankrupting others.
Well, I don't think she was successful in that one.
No, because everybody plays Monopoly with the idea that they are going to bankrupt others and gain as much wealth as they can. And they do it, very, very, enthusiastically. So that's the story of Monopoly.
That's interesting. I did a little research here and found the origin of the Ouija board. Now, before it was the Ouija board, they called it the talking board. And I was trying to look to see how far back the talking board goes. But if we're talking about the board game, Ouija, which is what this episode is about, the board games, a businessman by the name of Elijah Bond had the idea to patent a planchette sold with a board with the alphabet and the yes and no put on it, and sell it as something you could buy in the store as just a fun game. Okay. Bond filed for a patent on May 28th, 1809. And it was official on the 10th of February, 1891.
Yeah.
But that was when he filed for it. It was the day before my birthday. But
you were born back in the 1800s?
No, not in the 1800s, but I was born in May on the 29th. So
okay.
One day before my birthday.
All right.
So, but it was something that clearly he decided to capitalize on because the idea of having the talking board was kind of a parlor thing. People would get together and do it. So why not make money off of it instead of just having people do their own little home thing? Hey, how about you go down to the store and you can buy one, and everything's all set up for you, and you can unlock the mysteries of the universe.
Yeah, have a supernatural experience that'll keep you awake all night in the process.
Exactly, while Uncle Joe is laughing his head off because he scared everybody at the table.
So, since you brought in an interesting fact about the Ouija board, let me throw you one at you, going back to Monopoly. Let's go back to World War II, 1940s.
Okay.
And believe it or not, the prisoners of war in Germany were allowed board games.
Get out of town.
Yeah. So I guess the Red Cross would facilitate the shipment of board games to the POWs in Germany to help them, while away the monotonous hours. But American troops hid maps, compasses, and real money inside the Monopoly sets to help the prisoners escape.
Really?
That's something very few people know.
I had no clue.
Yeah.
No clue.
So hidden inside the Monopoly sets to help those prisoners escape. Isn't that something?
That is something else.
Now, there's lots of board games about war. We mentioned Risk, and we mentioned
Battleship.
Yeah. But illness is a recurring theme. You wouldn't think illness would inspire a lot of board games, but there's one that comes to mind called Operation, and it's poor perennial patients named Cavity Sam. You remember him?
That I do. He has water on the knees, butterflies in his stomach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then in the 1940s, Eleanor Abbott created a game for children to play while they were in quarantine, and its name was Candyland.
Wait, Candyland was developed while kids were in quarantine?
Some kind of quarantine, I think the polio epidemic of the 1940s.
How about that? Who would have thought that Candyland would have come out of
connected
something like
to
that?
Connected to the polio outbreak. So fast forward to our era, and in the era of the pandemic, board games can be a great relaxer, a great stress reliever, and a great way to spend some time safely while you're trying to avoid the very latest outbreak of something or other.
Well, let's buffer that with certain games can be relaxing, because I know that sometimes people can be very competitive when they play their board games.
That's true.
Especially with Monopoly.
Yeah.
If you don't get Park Avenue, I think that's the coveted corner that everybody wants, because it has the biggest payoff.
I always liked the tenements and the low rent.
Oh, what? Because you could be the slumlord and take everybody's money.
Yeah.
Wow.
I enjoyed owning those. Well, that's about it. I think there's lots more games out there, and I'm sure they have incredible stories behind them in their creation. But these are a few of our favorites, and I think it's remarkable to know that some of the games we still play today actually go back thousands of years.
It is fascinating.
Yeah. So with that, Gary, we wrap up another episode. I'm Richard.
And I'm Gary, and these were some incredible facts about board games. Who would have thunk it? If you like what you heard, remember, hit that subscribe button and join us each and every Friday for new episodes. All right, we'll see you next time.